Have you ever gotten rejected in any of your interviews? Yes, many times. What's your favorite interview story? This one I have told, but it's probably been a few years since I've told it, so I'll tell it again. So I went, long before I was quote unquote internet famous, I went for a job interview, and the company was in one city where I worked, but they had a remote DBA who lived in another city. And so I was sitting in the room with the interviewer, and then there was the DBA who was calling in remotely. And the DBA asked me several good questions, but one of the questions the DBA asked me was, if you were going to build your own monitoring tool for SQL Server, what would you do? And I said, I wouldn't. I said, if you're trying to hire me to build a monitoring tool, then we're both in trouble. I said, I'm not qualified to do that. I don't want a job doing that. Is that what you're hiring for? Because if it is, I apologize for wasting your time. And he said, oh, no, we're not hiring for that. I said, oh, okay, good. I said, so why would you ask me he said, but I need to know, how you would go about doing that. And I said, I wouldn't. I said, I would buy a third-party monitoring tool. They cost about $1,000 per monitored server. Here's a list of several good ones. I would pick one of those and roll with it. And he said, well, isn't there a free one? And I said, I don't know of a good free one. There might be one. I just don't know of it. And at $1,000, it's a rounding error for monitoring tools compared to the SQL Server licensing costs. And he said, well, do you know about monitoring tool X, whatever the name of it was? And I said, nope, never heard of it. He said, well, I wrote it. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. That can write off that. I'm not getting that job. He said, would you ever use it? And I said, well, I've never heard of it, but, tell me about it. And he said, it's completely free. It's been in SQL Server magazine a few times. It's open source. And I said, okay, so when I have a problem with it, where do I go? Is there some kind of support forum where I can go and someone else can help me when I'm trying to troubleshoot things because monitoring is down? He's like, no, there's not really anything like that. I said, well, then I wouldn't use it. I count on the monitoring, and if that thing goes down, then I don't know where my production servers are at or what's going on with them. Needless to say, I did not get that job. That interview did not go very well, but it was really funny because I met up with that guy again years later after I became internet famous. And I said, do you remember interviewing me for a position? And he was like, oh my God, that was you. Yeah. And we had a lot of laughs about it. And we got along great for years afterwards. I've lost track. I need to check in with him and see what he's doing these days.